week we looked at something new and something better. And we're going to look at it together today so that we can lay out exactly what is new and what is better about it. But first, we're going to do review. Because you know that I love a review, but we need refreshing, right? It's been a little while since we've done a good review. So, what book are we studying? Hebrews. Yay! And who is, or what do we know about the author of Hebrews?
Unknown.
Yes, unknown. It's an unknown author. Anything else that you remember?
Was Jewish. I mean,
Most likely
Most likely.
a very Jewish
yes.
person.
Second, what do
A
you call
believer,
it?
though,
Where's
right?
Carolyn? Carolyn was sitting
I know
here.
Carolyn's like, she comes ready.
No, she's visiting.
No, she's sick.
actually
She's
sick.
sick.
She didn't get to go?
She had to cancel her trip.
She was too sick.
No, she's been having a fever every day.
Carolyn, I feel so bad. Get better.
Okay. Okay, before we get off
Okay, I'm
track,
sorry.
second question. This is why we need Carolyn here.
I know.
Okay. The author is a Jewish believer, but he is what?
A second-hand hearer.
That's
what
and
Carolyn was
contemporary of Timothy.
That's
Yeah, there
exactly
you
what
go.
Carolyn was.
Yes.
Okay. And now the recipients, what do we know about them?
Believers.
And we believe that they are believers, right? What are they facing? What's the historical context? What's coming at them from without? Persecution. And what's the problem within?
Drifting away.
Yeah, the danger of drifting. They become dull of hearing. They aren't maturing the way that they should be, right? They should be what by now? Teachers, right? But they aren't ready for the meat of the word. They're still on the milk of the word, right? And so we have that. So what is the reason for the author writing this book to them?
To encourage them, but to.
To give a brief word of exhortation.
Yeah, there you go. I knew there was another
To
word.
give a brief word of
Yeah.
exhortation,
Yeah.
which we have been studying for 6 months, and which we will be studying for months longer, but it's brief. And we won't get to the bottom of anything, but it's brief. So anyway, now it's not just encouragement, but it is exhortation.
Yes,
It's kind of that,
right.
it's that pushing past just, oh, everything's going to be better, which there's some of that too, but it's more, let's live like this, right? So remember the patterns that we're seeing develop is this laying down of truth followed by a word of exhortation. Laying down of more truth followed by another word of exhortation. So we're seeing that is the pattern of this book. Okay, and what are some of the exhortations that we have already seen? Do you remember what the exhortation was in chapter 2, verse 1? You can cheat. You can
Pay much
cheat.
closer attention to what we have heard.
Yes. So for this reason, we must pay much closer attention to what we have heard. Why? Do you remember the reason why? And that was that danger that they're in.
That they drift away from it. Do
Right.
not drift away from what you've heard.
Right. So we don't want to drift. So we have to pay much closer attention. Remember that was that leaning in and kind of putting your ear kind of to really listen closely and to focus in on what has been said. What about 3:1, the exhortation in 3:1?
Therefore,
Consider Jesus.
Consider Jesus.
The apostle of life.
Right, so what's the focus? Not on the persecution, not on the drifting, not on my own circumstances, but the focus is consider Jesus. And he's presented there for the first time as a high priest, right? So we're starting to see that he's going to develop this understanding of Jesus as our great high priest, which we'll come to in just a minute a little bit more. What's the exhortation in 3:8?
do not harden your hearts
Yeah, do not harden your hearts like who?
like them.
back there, right? Those people in the wilderness, the wilderness generation who hardened their hearts, right? And so we see that there's kind of a comparison that goes on, and we walk through that. And then we see another exhortation in 3:12. What's the exhortation in 3:12?
Well, take care that they not have an unbelieving heart.
Right, and so it's still part of that comparison from that generation, right? Because they had an evil and unbelieving heart, or they had individually had evil and unbelieving hearts. And he's saying, take care of yourself, take care that you too do not have an evil and unbelieving heart. What about the exhortation in 4:1?
Let us fear if while a promise remains of entering his rest, any of you may seem to have come short of it.
Okay, so we need to fear. So we need to, it's a heads up, people. Let's make sure we're focusing in, right? Because we want to enter this rest. If there's still a promise of this rest, I want to get there, right? And he wants them there too. And then in 4:11, what does he say about that rest? What's the exhortation there?
Be diligent to enter it.
Yeah, so it takes dedication, it takes focus, it takes holding on firm, all of those kinds of things. It's not, I just go and I'm just gonna get there somehow, right? It's honed in, focusing on Jesus so that we can enter that rest. What about 4:14, the exhortation there?
Hold fast our confession.
Right, and so we see that there's kind of this, there's been kind of a theme running through of almost like we're in water, right? And there's the stream that's going by, and what are we to do? Kind of dig down, dig in, and focus in, right? And so that's that idea of holding fast our confession. Then in 6:1, there's another exhortation.
Pressing on to maturity.
That's all right.
I don't know if I can get it. I don't think you can get it. I
Grace or Rin.
I know. Yeah,
When you need her.
the exhortation in 6:1 is,
Pressing on to maturity.
let us press on to maturity. Now remember, we talked about this when we looked at that passage, that press on, we have a temptation, or we have a tendency to think that means it's me pressing on, right? But that pressing on is a passive. So who do you think is going to be helping us to press on, or pressing us on?
Let us, yeah.
Not just us.
So it's to let us press on.
Right, it is let us press on, but that press on is
Oh,
passive.
it's-
So we are being acted upon
Right.
in this pressing on. So who's doing it, Connie?
The Holy Spirit.
The Holy Spirit, right? So we have this Holy Spirit that's inside of us that is pushing us in the right direction, right?
Right.
And we're going to discover even more about that this week as we'll discuss. So then in 6:11, there's one more exhortation that we've seen so far. There's going to be more exhortation later, but what's the exhortation in 6:11?
Show the same diligence,
Yeah,
so you realize the full assurance of hope.
yeah, until the end. And remember, this is a forward-looking book. This is a forward-pressing book. Let me say this a different way. What are all of these exhortations pointing us to? To Jesus, right? And so what is the theme of the book of Hebrews?
Jesus.
Consider Jesus our high priest.
Right, so we put that exhortation, consider Jesus, and then we put it with our understanding that we're developing throughout this book of him as our great high priest. We've got the theme, right? We know we will always remember that it is a book of exhortation if we keep that consider right at the front of Jesus, our great high priest, so that we'll always understand it kind of goes together. We can't just consider him without doing something, right? He calls us to act based on who he is, right? And so the things that we'll do are the exhortations. We'll take care that there's not an evil and unbelieving heart, and we'll fear, and we'll be diligent to enter the rest, and we'll hold fast, and we'll do all of those things because we're looking at this Jesus, who is our great high priest. Okay, and there's one more concept that I want to look back and trace through Hebrews before we go on to our discussion from today, or from this week. It's the comparison of better things. Do you remember in chapter 1 what Jesus is compared to, and he is called better than, or more excellent?
The angels.
Yeah, he's better than the angels. And then in chapter 3, he's worthy of more glory than a certain individual from the Old Testament.
Moses.
It's Moses, right? So he's worthy of more glory and more honor than Moses. So would that say he's better than? He's better than. Okay, and then we have him compared to the Levitical priesthood. What is his priesthood according to the order of? Melchizedek. And is it a better priesthood than the Levitical priesthood?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a higher one. And how is that kind of laid out? Do you remember how that was laid out as to their relation?
You mean in that they were both called by God?
Yeah, they're both called by God, but then we have this event that happens between Abraham and Melchizedek, right?
He gave him a tenth of,
Right, and so, yeah, he gives a tenth,
yeah.
So
and
he gives
that,
some honor to Melchizedek.
Yes.
And the Levitical priesthood
Yes,
is
still in his-
loins, so
Yeah.
they're
Yes.
giving that.
yes, so it's that giving.
They're showing
Yeah, that
his
they
authority.
are the ones that God sets up as getting the 10% from the people. And then through Abraham, they are giving to Melchizedek. So remember, we talked almost like a stepping up, so he would be higher. Melchizedek would be, the Melchizedekian high priesthood would be a higher priesthood than the Levitical priesthood. And then there's a discussion in 7:19 of a better hope, right? And it's a better hope through which we what in 7:19?
Draw near to God.
Yeah, so that's really exciting because it's laying out that this all this way that we used to draw near to God, it's laid aside in light of this better hope, this better Jesus through which we can draw near to God. So we've begun to see in recent weeks of our study this Jesus, our great high priest. We're seeing him more and more as a high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. And we see him, he's presented as a perfect high priest, right? And that has led us all the way to chapter 8, where there's kind of a review right at the beginning. So in case we got lost along the way, in case the readers got lost along the way, he gives this review. And it's in verses 1 through 5. And it begins with, and I love this. Now the main point in what has been said is this, because sometimes we get a little lost, right? Like he's drawing it back and he's going, let's look at what we've seen so far. So what is the summary statement that's given in verses 1 and 2?
That we have this high priest, this better high priest.
Yeah, and he has done what?
Taken a seat at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens.
And he's also not just a high priest, but he's called a what in verse 2?
A minister.
A minister in the sanctuary, right? And in the true tabernacle, which the Lord pitched, not man, right? So we get this understanding of he's bringing it all the way back to Jesus, right? We've got our eyes back on Jesus, and then he can't help himself. He's got to give a little bit more detail about this office of high priest, right? And he does that in verse 3. What is necessary for every high priest according to verse 3?
To offer gifts and sacrifices.
Yeah, they have to have something to offer, right? And what did Jesus, the high priest, offer?
His life.
He offered himself, and that led us back to chapter 7, verse 27. So if you just want to have a chapter verse designation of where we see Jesus offer what he has to offer, he offers himself in 7:27. And then he rehashes that this Jesus as high priest, wouldn't even qualify according to what?
The Levitical law.
Right, so if he were here on earth, he wouldn't have qualified. We already talked about that. So again, this is almost a review, which, I love a review, so here we are. Now, why would he not qualify?
He wasn't in the house of Levi.
Right, he's not of the house of Levi, and they are the ones that are designated by the law
Right.
to be the high priest. Now, what did chapter 7 have to say about the law and Jesus? In verse 16, it tells us something about the law and Jesus.
He didn't become a priest based on the law, which had the physical requirements,
Mhm.
but according to the power of an indestructible life.
Okay, so it's not according to physical requirement, but the power of an indestructible life. What about verse 19?
Well, the law could make nothing perfect.
Right.
And so through Jesus, he brings a more hopeful offering and sacrifice.
Right, because he brings
Covenant.
he brings
He
what
brings us-
kind of sacrifice? A perfect,
perfect.
right? He brings in that better hope, that better hope of being perfect as he is perfect, right? As the Father is perfect. And then verse 28. And I think this was kind of like the crux of the argument, right? What does it have to say about Jesus and the law?
The ones who are priests according to the law are weak, but the Son was made perfect forever.
Yeah. Yeah, and how was he appointed? That's really key too
Yeah.
in that verse 28. The law appoints men as high priests. So that's how they become, right? They're born of the tribe of Levi, they're of the sons of Aaron, and then they become the high priests, right? But how does Jesus become? He's appointed, yes,
By God.
but by
the
what?
word of an oath.
By an oath, by a
Swear.
promise, right?
Ah.
So whereas one is by the law, the other is by a promise or an oath of God. And we saw what that oath was, right? And that's in verse 20. It's said over and over already, but if you just go back to 21 of chapter 7. The Lord has sworn and will not change his mind.
okay.
Thou art a priest forever. For how long?
Forever.
Now, what about this other priesthood? How long is the Levitical priesthood? How long does one serve?
Until he died.
Until he dies, right? But Jesus continues to serve because he is risen. He is living, right? Okay, so this is all encapsulated in the first 5 verses of chapter 8. This is our review, right? So we're going back through. Now, this Son of Promise is, as we have seen, appointed high priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. So let's go on to chapter 8, verses 6 through 13, where there's kind of like another layer added to our understanding of who this Jesus is. In verse 6, he has a more excellent ministry. What is the ministry? What else is there? Besides the high priest, he's also called something else.
A mediator.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. He's not just the high priest, the one who goes in for us before the Lord and offers up himself as a perfect sacrifice, but he has obtained a more excellent ministry by as much as he is also the mediator of what? Of a better covenant. And it is enacted on what?
Better promises.
Yeah. Now, this mention of a better covenant or a new covenant, as it's later referred to, implies another covenant, right? So, and we know that these recipients, the recipients of this letter, they being mainly Jewish people, would have kind of just, this is just old hat to them. They know exactly what he's talking about, right? But we needed a little bit of help, right? And so that's where we went back this week. And we spent our week looking back at this old covenant and understanding and unpacking the truths there. So let's look at together what we learned about these two covenants so that we can compare them and we can evaluate them. And as the author of Hebrews does, we can see if we agree with him that it's better, right? So that's what we're going to kind of do. That's going to be our task for today. Do we think that the new covenant is better than the old covenant? You may think that's a no-brainer, but let's make sure that we understand it according to Scripture of why it's better, right? We may just like it.
They were waffling.
Right, yeah. They had the temptation to go back,
Yeah.
right? So we're going to find out what's better. Okay, so what I thought that, you know me, the best way I know how to do this is to observe it according to the 5 W's and an H, right? And the best way that I know how to do that is to make a list. And the best way that I know how to make one list and compare it to another is to make two lists. And so I did that. I just took a piece of paper and folded it in half and did the old and the new on one side. So if you want to do that, if you have extra paper, I have orange paper if you need it. I need it. Okay. I'll just pass it around.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. Because I get all my white people mixed up.
I know. It's kind of nice to have like something to stick out. Orange paper. You know me and my colored paper. Okay. So what we're going to do first, when we have this list, and I'll go ahead and write up here. I'm going to do my very best to write small, and then I'm going to just stop writing on the board altogether, and you can just write, because I'm going to run out of room, I know I am. Okay, so we have the old and the new. Yes. Okay. That was amazing. Now, did you know, what I thought we'd look at first, before we go back to our homework, is what we can observe from chapter 8 regarding these two covenants. So as you were doing your observation worksheet, did you mark the first and the second kind of in distinct ways? You might have marked the word covenant the same way, but did you find a way to mark first and second in two different ways? Okay, well that'll help you. So we'll just walk through it, and as we do it, you can mark it if you want to. So we're starting in verse 6, talking about these two covenants and comparing them. But now he has obtained a more excellent ministry, by as much as he is also the mediator of a better covenant. So what covenant would that be? That would be the new one. So I put that as a 2. I mean, I just made it real simple. I had a 1 and a 2. It's really exciting. So
I was going to do that, but then sometimes, 1 is supposed to be best and 2 is
Right.
second. So I thought, I'm going to do N and O.
There you go. However
Just
you want
throwing
to do
that
it.
in.
Yeah, and that's the whole idea, is it's not dogmatic. We don't have to be dogmatic about the markings, right? We just need to know what it says. We need to be able to identify it when we see it, just looking right at the page. So that's that second covenant, or the new covenant, which has been enacted on better promises. I'm just going to read through, and then we'll make sure we've got our list. For if that first covenant had been faultless, there would have been no occasion sought for a second. For finding fault with them, he says, behold, days are coming, says the Lord, when I will effect a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not like the covenant which I made with their fathers on the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt. For they did not continue in my covenant, and I did not care for them, says the Lord. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says the Lord. I will put my laws into their minds, and I will write them on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And they shall not teach everyone his fellow citizen and everyone his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for all will know me, from the least to the greatest of them. For I will be merciful to their iniquities, and I will remember their sins no more. When he said a new covenant, he has made the first obsolete. But whatever is becoming obsolete and growing old is ready to disappear. Okay, so let's go through this and make sure that we've got the information. Let's look at the Old Covenant first and write down what we learned in chapter 8 regarding this Old Covenant.
It's faulty, verse 7.
Yeah, it's not faultless, it's faulty, right?
Yes.
Now, who found the fault?
It was the people. Oh.
God found fault, but who did he find fault with? Or what did he find fault with? Was it the covenant?
No, they weren't following it.
It's the people, right? So there's nothing necessarily wrong with the covenant, right? That's not the faulty issue. It's who he made the covenant with, and these people weren't following him, right? So God found fault with the people. And it says that in verse 8. Okay? And it says it's not faultless in verse 7, so we can just call it faulty just for the sake of argument. Okay, now what about verse 9? What do we learn about the covenant in verse 9?
Was that where it was obsolete and aging?
No, that's verse 13. What's in verse 9 of chapter 8?
Oh, yeah.
You're ahead of me,
Yeah.
Sheila.
The people didn't remain faithful to God's covenant.
Okay, now who did he make it with?
Their fathers.
Their fathers. Okay, so God, and that's another key, right? It's God that made it. That's verse 9. And he made it with the fathers. Okay? And when did he do it?
Mount Sinai. That's
When
not
does
Abraham.
we're just about to say, when did he do it? Because it says it in verse 9.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
We can answer all these who, what, when, where's. It's kind of nice.
Kind of nice.
When he took them out of Egypt.
Yeah, so he does it when he brought them out of Egypt. And we're going to get into the detail of that when we go back to the Old Testament in just a few minutes, okay? So that's verse 9. Hebrews chapter 8 is letting us know just what we can know just by observing this. And then we go to our cross-references. So we focus in here. What happens in verse 9?
They did not continue.
Yeah, so they did not continue. And what else, what's kind of the little bit more that's there about them?
He didn't care for them.
I'm sorry?
Is it where he says, I did not care for them?
Right. That's not very nice.
No, no.
But do they
it's-
kind of deserve it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Does that make you feel better?
Yeah, my knees are real bad.
Okay.
That's how serious it was, though.
Okay, and he did not care for them.
And I can see that I would need to do a word study on care.
Yes.
Because I'm
Because we
sure
know.
he did, from our definition, care for them.
Right.
But
But he
so
may
the-
not have cared
He didn't-
because they took themselves out from under the.
Yeah, he
covenant.
didn't protect them, or he didn't.
And that's what he told them
Yeah,
too,
right.
right? And we're gonna again, this is just what we're getting from chapter
Right.
8, because yes, we need to unpack that, right? We need to unpack, what are you saying
Because
here?
don't you know his heart hurt?
Oh,
Don't you think his heart hurt?
oh yes.
See, and
Very
sometimes
much.
the way we use the word care makes us think, he didn't care.
He didn't care.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just wrote them off,
Yeah.
no big deal. No, obviously.
Yeah, right.
We have the rest of the story.
Right,
We know that,
exactly.
Right, okay, so what about, what else do we find out about the first from chapter 8? Or the new covenant? or
That was
old-
about all I got.
What happened in
Well,
13?
he made the first became obsolete.
Okay, so it was.
Yeah.
I have no idea if this is an actual word, but it was obsoleted.
Obsolete.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Uh-huh.
Became
It
obsolete.
is now.
By the second. This is verse 13. And what is the commentary regarding that in verse 13 as well? regarding when something becomes obsolete.
Growing old and ready to disappear.
Right, okay, so if it's obsolete, then, and it is the old, what can we say about that? Can we infer that that's what it's saying? That it's growing old and getting ready to disappear? Is that okay? Am I jumping to any conclusions, or I'm just observing, right? I just want to make sure. It's kind of nice with all of the interpretive questions we've had, when we can get right back down to what we really can know just by observing the text. What does it say? And we don't have to worry about the interpretation, but I just want to make sure we're all on observation. So, growing old, and it's going to disappear, or getting ready to disappear, according to verse 13. Okay, now what about the new covenant? What can we learn about the new covenant just in chapter 8 of Hebrews 6?
It's better.
It's better. I love that he just starts off with just a real simple understanding. It's better. Before we go on, I just want you to know it's better. That's verse 6, right?
Yes.
Okay. And
It provides complete forgiveness for sin.
what verse?
Yeah, that's the one I didn't write down.
You should know better. I learned my lesson.
Okay, when we get there, okay? Now, what is it enacted on?
Better promises.
Okay, it's enacted on better promises. That's verse 6 as well, right? Now, who's the mediator?
Jesus.
That's verse 6? Okay,
It's made with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah.
okay. What verse?
8.
Anything else in verse 7?
Yeah, I was gonna say, if he did, I don't know how to say it without just repeating the verse.
That's fine.
If it had been faultless, there would.
The first one.
Yeah, if the first had been faultless, there would have not been needed a second.
Okay, so it's resulted because of the fault of this one,
There you
right?
go, okay.
Okay. I have no idea if this is too small, but I'm not even gonna get to the bottom probably before we're done with chapter 8, okay? Okay, it's referred to in verse 6 and verse 13 as what? Look up here.
A new covenant.
It's new. Okay, just so you know, it's new. That's how it's referred to. Did we look up the word new at the end of our study this week?
Yes.
Did you get the time to do it, the chance to do it?
Yeah.
Good, good. So we understand what that means. Okay. Now, what does it say about this new covenant in verse 8? It's made with Israel and Judah, but who makes it?
The Lord.
Right, and how's it termed there in verse 8?
He will effect a new covenant.
Yeah, so it's effected by the Lord. That's verse 8. It's made with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. And it's, what else according to verse 8?
It's coming.
It's new.
Days
Oh, the days are coming, yeah.
When I will affect.
Right, it's promised, right? It's promised by the, is this a
Okay.
promise?
It's a promise.
What does God say? I will effect a new promise. Is he saying, here's a new covenant? No, he's saying, I will do this. It's a promise from the Lord from this time. So it's promised by the Lord. That's verse 8. Okay, now, what about verse 9?
It's not like the first covenant.
Not like the first covenant. And what's next? What do you have next on your list? If you made a list. What about verse 10?
Well, he kind of spells it out.
Mm.
This is what it's gonna look like.
Right,
These are my
and-
promises.
But I was real curious because it says, for this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel, and it doesn't mention Judah.
I know, it is interesting. I thought that was interesting that it's saying that, but sometimes they are divided, and sometimes they're put together under the heading of the house of
But the
Israel.
first time, the fact that the first
I know.
time he mentioned them both, and this time didn't, I thought was curious.
Right, and we're going to look at that a little bit here in just a little bit when we go back to the Old Testament of why that was the case. Because remember, we have the different prophets that are giving this information
True.
about this new
True,
covenant.
true.
So we have Jeremiah and we have Ezekiel, and they're giving kind of different.
So we have to
audiences
remember where the
information.
quotes are coming from.
Yes,
Ah,
yeah.
okay.
Now this one is from Jeremiah, I believe. I think that's what they said
Yeah, I think it
is
is,
the
yeah.
Jeremiah passage. But yes, so
Okay.
but we always just kind of want to keep in mind that the house of Israel includes all of them.
Yes.
And sometimes they're made distinct and based on the
Yes.
context of what
Okay.
part of the history we're in. Sometimes it'll be the house of Israel and it'll include just the 11, right? And sometimes it'll be the house of Judah that'll include Judah and the half tribe of Manasseh, I think, who's included in that. Okay, so what do we find out about this covenant? Like, we've got all this information, he hasn't even said what it is yet, but we're finally getting down to the meat of it. He says, "For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel." So here it is, he's promising it again, I will make this covenant. And who's doing it?
The
It is
Lord.
made by the Lord. That's verse 10. Okay, what are the details?
But right now
Well,
he's just talking to
He will
the
put
Jews.
his laws into their minds.
Okay, and who's doing it?
God.
Okay,
Mhm.
God will, and I just kind of created a list of what he says he's going to do based on
Okay.
God will put law into their minds,
Write them on their hearts.
write the law, right?
Mhm.
On their hearts. Okay,
He will be their God.
be their God, and,
And he and they shall be his people.
okay. Okay,
All will know him.
okay, all will know him. Because you know I can do a chart within a chart. So great.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, they'll all know him, from the least to the greatest of them. It's all, so we want to know that. It's all will know him. And what else does he say he will do?
Will be merciful to their iniquities.
And what?
And remember their sins no more.
Verse 12, which I didn't didn't write down.
Yeah, that's verse 12. And what else do we learn about this covenant according to verse 13?
Well, I thought it was curious, before you get to 13, that in verse 11, that they don't have to teach everyone to know the Lord because they will know it.
Why?
Because he's in their hearts.
Yeah, he's in here and he's in here, right?
Yeah.
I just love that.
Yeah.
It's not, you don't even have to go, come on, people,
Yeah,
love him
yeah,
better,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's none of that.
Yeah.
They love him perfectly.
Yeah.
They know him perfectly. Oh, just love it.
Yeah.
Aren't you excited about that?
Yes.
But I still hope we get that movie night and those classes that we could just sit at his feet and just learn more about it, you know?
And
'Cause I know
eat
we'll
whatever
know
we
it.
wanna eat.
I know we'll know it. I know we'll know it because we'll be able to obey him. We'll have his law written on our hearts. But to me, I want to know some of the history. You know, I
Oh,
want to know some of the
yes.
history about. But you know, I want to know
Yes.
those details. Of,
Yes.
That's why movie night has got to happen. It's a home movie
Yes.
night in heaven. It's going to be so great.
Oh, you know it's gonna happen.
Okay, so what about 13? What else, what's the last things that are on our list about this new covenant?
The first will be made obsolete.
Okay, so what happens, how is the first one made obsolete?
By that one.
By this one. So it makes the first obsolete. Okay, so when this one is brought in, this one goes away, right? Okay, it's growing old and getting ready to disappear because of this new covenant. Whoa, okay, that was a lot, right? So I now no longer have room to write on the board, but we're going to go back to the Old Testament and we're going to get even more. So keep your list out, and as you want to, make a note of what you discover about the old and about the new. So, before we do that, I thought it would be really important to get our terms straight. At the beginning of the week, we did a word study, and we looked up the word covenant in the Greek, and we looked up the word covenant in the Hebrew, right? Did you get a chance to do that? And that's why it took us 2 days to do day one of our homework, because it was so much information. Okay, so what did you learn about the Greek word for covenant?
It's an agreement.
Yes.
A contract.
A binding promise of far-reaching importance.
Okay, and what is it? What is it doing? What is it?
Relations between individual groups and nations.
Okay,
Vine says a disposition of property by will,
Mm-hmm.
or otherwise.
right, and it's not by will of like my will. It's by an actual document, right? It's a will.
Which I think is curious, because he also, somebody said, Zodiatus maybe, no will is of any value while the one who made it is still alive.
Yes. And isn't it interesting? I mean, I was right there with you, Jane, as far as it taking like a lot longer to do our
Yeah.
because she emailed me, she's like, it took me so long.
I made myself sit there and finish that baby.
No, there was a lot there, and so it's laying out in a certain order. This is what Zodiac said. It's laying out in a certain order, but it's who gets what, right? That's what it's laying out. Is this will kind of like we can compare it to a last will and testament, right? This covenant is who gets the stuff at the end of this person's life, right? And who is this person, do you think, that it might be talking about that is going to die?
Jesus.
Oh, it was just so, like, all the little synapses were just going together. It was so great. Okay, so, but I loved this, and I think this is it's from Zodiatus. It's a unilateral meaning one person doing this, right? A unilateral disposition of God toward man as a symbol of his grace. We do not have a bilateral agreement through this word, diatheke, but the expression of the disposition of God toward humanity. So it is, and I love so much of what he said about it. It's a will made by God for the benefit of man. So if we can just kind of start to just unpack the understanding of that this is not us, right? This is not us entering into covenant with God. The covenant exists outside, the will exists outside of our entering in, right? It is made. This covenant is cut. It happens, right? And I just thought that was really neat. We're not talking about a bilateral agreement. We're talking about a unilateral agreement. Okay, now what about the Old Testament word for covenant?
There wasn't much.
There wasn't much, but it's interesting.
Yeah.
It is interesting.
A compact, and in the sense of cutting.
Right. And so we remember that ceremony that we looked at, I think it feels like forever ago, but just
Yeah.
a couple weeks ago, between Abraham and God, and he's cutting covenant with him. And he appears as what in Genesis 15?
Fire.
Smoking
As a
oven.
smoking oven, and he passes through what?
Pieces of meat.
Yeah, these cut pieces of sacrifice, of offering. This is how the covenant is cut. And what else did you discover from looking that up?
I just had this, I don't remember who it was, but it just said, the word in the covenant defined the basis of God's character in the Old Testament. And I like that because so many people can't understand, why did God do that? Why would he do that? And it's all based on covenant. If you don't understand covenant, you don't understand why God does what he does.
Right, and it's based on relationship, right? He's a God of relationship. He cuts covenant and with man, which is miraculous in and of itself, that he has this relationship whereby not just I know you and you know me, but we're in this together. We've cut this covenant. If you obey me, then I will bless you. If you do not obey me, what will happen? I will curse you, right? And your enemies will be my enemies. If we're all in this together, then my enemies or your enemies will be my enemies. I will fight for you. I will do my battle for you. And the things that he is saying to them are something that other gods don't say, other little g gods don't say to their
And
people, right?
what overwhelms me is that when you talk about cutting covenant, and I can see the pictures and movies that I've seen, where you see the bloody animals, and walking, the fire going through. He's the bloody
Yes.
sacrifice.
Yes.
Because you can't have the covenant without death.
I know. I know.
And so, and this is the unilateral, he did it, he died.
Yeah, and he just gives us this picture all the way back to the New
Yes,
Testament so that we always understand. And we did covenant, the study of covenant, what feels like forever ago, but some of you were here. It was a long time ago, and do you remember that he cut covenant so early that it was before the world was kind of divided. And so there's an understanding of covenant in almost every single culture out there.
Isn't that interesting?
So he impresses his character into us by this understanding of covenant. And so he carries it through so that when the people who know about Jesus go to these nations that are so far off and so far removed, and they say, he died and he created, they go, we know about that.
Yeah.
We know about that. It
Yes.
perks up their understanding because they have this, however twisted and however perverted it may have gotten, they've got this understanding of covenant. So yes, it's so foundational to our understanding of who God is and how he acts towards people. And then one of the things that Zodiatus said that I thought was really good is that it is a divine order or agreement which is established without any human cooperation, springing from the choice of God himself, whose will and determination account for both its origin and its character. And it refers, for the most part, to a solemn promise or undertaking by God. So that's saying it's unilateral. Huh. So this covenant, that it's placed in different understandings in different contexts, whereas in the New Testament it's understood as a will, like a last will and testament. It's still unilateral then. This Old Testament understanding of a covenant is a unilateral, it's just God doing it, right? And so he's the one who decides to cut covenant with man. It's not man approaching, right, and saying, let's get in this together. It's him going forth and saying, I will cut covenant with you, whether it's in the Old Testament or whether it's in the New Testament. It's really, I love that we have this understanding that doesn't change, right? Is God the same? as he was in the Old Testament, as he
Yeah.
is today?
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so we've kind of got our terms all situated. Let's see. I gotta find my spot again. Okay, to give us further background and understanding on the first covenant, we looked at the inauguration of the first covenant, and that was in Exodus 19 through 23. We did that on day one. It took us a while. It took us the second day of our week. And so I thought what we would do is we just kind of take a big picture look at it, because that's a whole lot of chapters. What do the sons of Israel do in response to Moses giving them the law? This question was put to us on page 34, question 5A.
We'll do everything you said.
3 times that says that. Should have had that tattooed.
I know. Well, and they do. That's what's interesting. They have those phylacteries. They have all the things that are supposed to remind them. They've got tablets of stone that God wrote out with His own finger. I mean, I guess we'll do it.
We have God's word too. We
Yeah,
don't use the
yeah,
word.
I know. But again, that's all within us, right? That's all within our
Yes.
power,
Yes.
right? There's not a promise of the Holy Spirit here, is
No,
there?
no.
So that's a huge distinction that we need to
Right.
keep in mind,
Right.
that they are just gutting this
Gutting it
out,
out.
just gut level obedience, right? And so they, of course, they hear this good law, because the law is good, and there's nothing wrong with it. They hear it, and they say, all that the Lord has spoken, we will do. And we will be obedient, right? They're sure about it. They're just absolutely sure. And don't we do that too?
Yeah.
We start out the new year with New Year resolutions. I'm going to do that. This is going to happen all year long. I'm going to do it. And then, like January 3rd, we're done, right? So, well, they were kind of the same way, because when they get to the bottom of, when Moses gets to the bottom of the mountain, what's happened?
Oh,
They're already.
They're already not being obedient, right?
It's amazing how we get that.
Yeah, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself in the
Okay.
questions I'm going to ask you. But okay, so they say we will do it. Now, how is the law given to the people?
Moses went up the mountain because they were scared of him.
Yes,
And he got it and brought it down.
right. So Moses goes up there. God gives Moses the law, and then writes on the tablets, right? So the tablets then come down, and then those go to the people, right? So it's there's a mediator, right? There's someone in between God and man at this point. Okay. Did this generation obey and keep their word?
No.
No. And could it be said that God found fault with them? Yes. These are the ones who did not get to enter into the rest, right? And we've talked about the rest, and we talked about that generation already in Hebrews. They didn't get to go into the promised land. So then in our study, next we looked at the next generation of Israel. And this is the generation that is at the precipice of going into the promised land. Moses gives them the law again, right? And what do they say? We're going to do it. We're going to do it. And what is the focus, though, of this reiteration of the covenant? We looked at that on page 35. This is still day one, believe it or not. And, oh, I'm sorry. No, it's day 2, page 37. What's the focus there of this reiteration of the covenant? We see something mentioned over and over and over and over through those chapters. This is Deuteronomy 28, 29, and 30.
Oh, the land.
Yes, this is where the understanding of the land is coming in. And why is that understanding coming in? You think?
They're ready to get into the land.
They're just about to go in. And so he gives them this covenant, and he says, as long as you are obedient, you get to what?
All the blessings.
Yeah, you get to stay in the land.
stay in the
And
land.
I'll prosper you in this land, and all of these things, right?
Right.
But what happens if they do disobey, if they don't keep the covenant?
They'll
be torn from the land.
They'll be taken out of land. So again, it's about their relationship to this land that he has promised, right? If they're obedient, they get to stay, they get blessing. If they're disobedient, they don't get to stay, they get torn from it, and there's curses.
And this is where I have a lot of trouble, because it says the Lord will delight to make you perish and destroy you. And so I looked up the word delight, didn't help me. It says rejoice, to be bright, cheerful, be glad, greatly, joy, make mirth, rejoice. I can't picture God being that way when he has to
He knows
destroy
the bigger
them.
picture.
Well,
But I
He's
still
looking
can't
past
imagine
that. He's not
him.
just going, hey, this is great, let me wipe them out. He loves them.
He's doing the right thing for them, it's gonna be for their good. Even though it's like, when you
Spanks
discipline your
Grace.
children.
Yeah, well, I
it's
don't
not
rejoice
pleasant.
on the
It's not
inside.
pleasant, but you know it's gonna result in something
well,
good.
but also, I mean, if we want to think about it too, let's bring it into our New Testament understanding of who God is.
Yes.
It says he was pleased to crush him,
That's right.
Jesus. Now, why would a God,
Because he knows what the
but
result
also
will be.
because he
Yes.
loves justice.
Yes.
We need to keep that in mind.
Yeah, you're
that he
right.
is seeing justice done, right? He
Right.
promises them this. It isn't, and he is.
And it's their choice.
It's their choice.
Yes.
He's also a covenant keeping God. He's keeping his side, right? But he's saying, now beware, when you disobey, these are the consequences. They have the choice, but he is just and he is within every single one of his rights.
I
And
understand
indeed is required by his character.
I just don't want him to rejoice in it.
But that's but he loves
I'm having
justice,
trouble.
right?
He does love
So
justice.
we have
Yes,
to keep
you're
in mind
right.
that he is
Two
a
sides
just.
of the coin.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
He is grieving as he has to be just.
Yeah.
And
He is.
it's just hard for us to wrap our brains
It
around.
is,
Yeah.
it is.
But as
but I like
much
what
as
you
he
say,
is delighting, he is grieving.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's the same thing
I just
that we
wish it-
see when we see Jesus on the cross. He says the same thing.
Yeah.
He was
Yes,
pleased
yes.
to crush him.
Yeah.
Well, obviously
Yeah.
it was a grief, right?
Okay.
Obviously it was
Okay.
horrible.
But he
and
knew.
yet justice
Right.
was being brought to the fore because
Right.
all of our sin, all of iniquity for all time was laid on him.
That's what he's
And
rejoicing in.
He's rejoicing
Yes.
in justice.
Yes.
And so we have to see it that
Okay.
way. And it's hard because we get our
Yeah.
understanding of from
Yeah.
the English understanding
Yes.
of rejoicing. But it is. I don't want you to think that it's not that. He's rejoicing because justice is served.
Yeah.
It's being all things are set right.
Yes.
And when all
Yes.
things are set
Yes.
right
I
and
like
justice
that.
is
Yes.
brought,
Yeah.
then yes, we rejoice, right?
Yeah.
Does it mean that there's not pain and there's not death?
Right.
Because
Right.
there has to be, to cover sin, there has to be blood, right? There
Yes.
has to be death. And in the same way, they have gone their own way and gone their own way. And as we will see, not we will see today, but
Yeah.
we will see that they turn away and they lose even the sacrificial system. They're not even doing it the right way. They're putting up idols. They're doing it. I mean, they're going their own way. There's no covering for their sin
Right.
any longer because they don't even bring their sins before him the way that they should be, right? So there's no longer any covering for their sin. So they have to have the penalty for their sin, and it's brought to bear on them. And when it's brought to bear on them, then he can rejoice because justice is brought back, right?
Okay.
Right? I mean, it's not. It doesn't make it easy,
Yeah.
right?
It's very important when we present the gospel and to people
Yes.
that they understand. He
Yes.
is just because all they
Yes.
come in on is
Yes.
him being loving,
Yes.
the emotion of love.
Yes.
is important.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I
So
know
it
that,
has
yeah.
to be his justice. And that's why he uses the word justifying, because that's the legal term
Yeah.
for salvation.
Yeah.
It's the legal.
Yeah, we stand justified before him, but that's, he sees justice done. How does he see justice done in the new covenant? The offering of Jesus,
That's right.
the offering of himself. I mean, that's just,
That's amazing.
yeah, we have to understand it in that whole broad picture. Okay, so, okay, we're doing big
Yeah, it
picture.
is.
Okay, so we see, as they're standing on the precipice, the repetition of this covenant, the repetition of this law, we see that if they obey, they get to stay in the land, everything's beautiful, wonderful, and fabulous. Do they have the choice? Yes. if they don't obey, they get taken from the land and they've got curses and that kind of thing. And do they have the choice? Yes. And what do they say they choose?
But you still.
Oh, they choose to obey, of
Yeah.
course, of course. Now, again, we have to remember that this is not while they have the Holy Spirit residing in them. This is, again, gut level obedience. We will do what you say and we will be obedient. And at the end of, I've always loved this verse at the end of Deuteronomy, chapter 29. Maybe it's 30. Oh, now I'm not going to be able to find it.
The secret thing?
No, not that.
You sure it's not 28?
It may be 28. Let me see what I got. I've got it marked in my Bible, so.
Oh, no, Deuteronomy.
Well, okay. So I'm apparently not going to be able to find it just immediately. But I love that he says, before you lay life and blessing, and before you lay death and cursing, so choose life.
Yeah.
Moses so wants them to choose life because he has this understanding of this blessing, this great blessing that comes from choosing God.
30:19.
Yeah, 30.
19.
We know it's in.
Yeah, I know it's in there somewhere. Yeah, I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, the blessing and the curse. So choose life in order that you may live and your descendants. I mean, it's laid out there, and it's the
not like they
choice.
didn't know.
And then
right?
tells them how to choose.
Yeah, how to do it, by loving the Lord your God, and by obeying his voice, and by holding fast to him. For this is your life and the length of your days, that you may live in the land which your Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give them. Okay, so we have this understanding a little bit more of what's going on. And we know from our Old Testament history that they did not do well in the land, did they? They didn't remove all of the enemies that they had.
That was their first job.
That was their first job, and they didn't do it very well. And they didn't, thus, because they didn't remove the enemies, they also didn't remove their idols, right? So then they kind of brought it all in, and we can just do it all together, and, it's kumbaya, right? No, that's not how it works.
Be politically correct.
Right. And because of this, because of what they did, they didn't remove them, and they set up idols. We have the period of the judges, right, that come through, and then we have the period of the kings. And after a really, really long time of God's forbearance, right, he judges them, and then they come back, and then they go away, and then he judges, we see all that. This is, again, encapsulating the entire Old Testament, basically.
Good job.
Finally, he removes them from the land, right? And they're removed in two different segments, right? Because the kingdom becomes divided, and we have Israel and Judah, and the first that are taken away from the land is what's the first group? Is Israel, and then the second group is Judah, and so they go away, and then we have these two captivities, and again, goodness gracious, there's so much history here. But even in the midst of the defeat of exile, God calls to his people, and he gives them a promise of a new covenant. And I love that what they had us do. They said on day 3, I think, put yourself into this period of history. Can you imagine what this promise meant to those who listened? They are in the midst of defeat, of slavery, of God has forsaken us. And here come these precious words from this man of God.
Well, they're probably ready to listen.
Oh, I would think so. I would think so. I would think so. And I'm sure they're going, if we had only, right?
Yeah.
The regret of not being obedient when they had the opportunity to be obedient, and their fathers had the opportunity to be obedient, has got to just weigh on them in such a huge way. So we have this promise of a new covenant. And Jeremiah 31 and 32 disclose this new covenant. And we looked at this on day 3, page 37, starting on page 37. Now, what are the terms of this new covenant?
There's
Do they look familiar?
They're kind of what you put on the board.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
So that we know that that's what it's talking about, right? So let's go over them just, I'm not going to write them down, and you don't have to write them down, but you can put next to where you've already written them down, where they're also stated, you can put in parentheses that it's Jeremiah 31 through 40. What is it that he will do? What will God do?
Make a
Put
new
his
Put the
law
law in their minds,
and on their heart,
write it in.
and write it.
And he will be their
God.
and he will forgive their
Sins.
iniquity and their remember their sins no more.
Everyone
Hey,
can know it.
that literally is this right here, right? And what will Israel do?
They will be his people. They shall not teach neighbors or brothers to know the Lord. They all shall know him.
Right, so they will know the Lord. So they'll have two things. They'll be his people and they will know the Lord. Is that something they're doing?
No.
Not really, no. He says, I will be their God and they will be my people, right? It's not necessarily I can make myself God's people, right? And then they will know the Lord. Why will they know the Lord? We talked about this already. Why will they know him?
God's covenant with them.
Because he puts his law into their hearts and into their minds. And we haven't gotten to the best part. Yeah, so we'll get there in just a second. Okay, so it's so good. Oh, it's so good. I mean, this progressive revelation of who God is just amazing. I mean, it's just, you have to slog through some hard stuff, right? But they did it. They slogged through some hard stuff. So how is this accomplished? How is this new covenant accomplished? Who does it? Yeah, it's the Lord who accomplishes this. Again, remember we talked about it being a unilateral thing. This is not me going to the Lord and saying, look, I know I messed up. I know that I'm in exile. Can we work a deal? Right? No, he is in his mercy and in his grace. He is reaching out to this people who have fallen so far as to be removed from their land. And he says, I will make a new covenant with you. How miraculous and beautiful is this new covenant? Now, what about the land? What's going to happen regarding the land? Because again, right at the end, as they were on the precipice, that became the focus of this law, is how you will know if you're keeping the law and how you will know if you're still in covenant and remain in covenant with God is based on the land. So what does this new covenant have to say about the land?
He's going to restore it back to them.
Yeah.
Bring them back to it.
Yeah, and we looked at that on day 4, page 38, and it was question 1A. What does he say in verse 41 of Jeremiah 32?
He will faithfully plant them in the land.
Yeah, and I love how he says it with what?
With all his heart and with all his soul.
I mean, he has his whole being invested in this process, right? And then what about in 44?
Men will buy fields, I will restore their fortune.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I just was looking at this again this morning, and I'm trying to get there. Let me get there. 37. Oh, I'm still not there. Hold on. There's just so much to Jeremiah. Okay. Okay, he says, verse 38, they shall be my people and I will be their God, and I will give them one heart and one way. I love that. They get one heart and one way, that they may fear me always for their own good and for the good of their children after them. And it says, and I will make an everlasting covenant with them, and I will not turn away from them to do them good. And I will put the fear of me into their hearts so that they will not turn away from me. And then he goes on and he says, and I will rejoice over them to do good, and I will faithfully plant them in this land with all my heart and all my soul. And what is being said about this land in verse 43?
It's theirs. Is that what you-
In verse 43.
Oh,
It was
in verse 43, that
desolation.
It's desolate and.
Yeah, so it's being said that this land is desolate without man or beast, and it was given into the hands of the Chaldeans,
Chaldeans,
right?
Yeah.
So then verse 44 says, men shall buy fields for what?
Money.
For many. Sign and seal deeds and call in witnesses in the land of Benjamin and the environs of Jerusalem, in the cities of Judah and the cities of the hill country, and the cities of the lowland, the cities of the Negev, for I will restore their fortunes. He is saying what you think of as desolate and which could be given away to people for nothing, suddenly it will have value. This land will be rich again, and it will be worth paying money for. Isn't that interesting? It's worthy of the value is brought back. We had the housing market crash.
Yeah.
This was the ultimate housing market crash. When they went away and they were away from, the land had no value. It was desolate. And he's saying, not only will I bring you into this land, and they're going, well, why would I want to be in this land? It's desolate.
Yeah.
He's saying, I'm going to bring it back, and it's going to be worth not only you paying your own money, but you call in people so that they sign the documents too and say, yes, this person owns this land. Its value is brought back. Its richness is just, it's so neat. I just love it. Okay, so the land becomes theirs, right? They come back and they have the land.
You know what's cool is that, I mean, we can see that
Yes.
fulfilled in that prophecy, just, just a physical way of
Yeah.
how they have brought back the land.
Right, and it didn't have any value until they came back into it. Now all of a sudden everybody wants to fight over it again.
That's a whole nother story.
I know. But again, it becomes blessed when the people of God are in it, right? Because who's doing it? God. It's not about the people doing it. It's God that's blessing this land. Okay. Now, what is different about this covenant regarding God's laws? Now, before that old covenant, where are the laws?
On the tablet.
On the tablets, right? They're external. Where are they now?
In their hearts.
Yeah, it's internal. It's in their hearts and their minds. Now, how does this happen? How do I get what was external and written on tablets of stone?
To the Holy Spirit.
Well, we're not quite there. He tells me in Jeremiah that he's going to give a what?
Give me a new heart.
A new heart. So it's like a heart transplant, right?
Yeah.
It's removing the old stony heart and putting a heart of flesh into man, right? And so, what else is different about God's laws here? Whereas,
They'll last forever.
yes, it's eternal, right? Whereas the old was passing away, right? That there was a day when that law would be done away with, right? But this is eternal, everlasting, forever. Now, what does this new heart do for his people? We looked at that on day 4, page 39, question 3D.
They're able to do the law and keep the law, whereas before they could not.
Right, and so he
They'll
gives them...
walk in a statute.
Yeah, he gives them a new heart, one heart, and he takes out the heart of stone and he puts the heart of flesh in so that they will walk in his statutes, keep his ordinances, and do them. That's really pretty neat. Now he goes on to explain this new covenant more in Ezekiel 36, and that was what we looked at next. What is new in Ezekiel 36 that hasn't been shared with them before regarding the new covenant? This is the exciting part.
Put a new spirit within us.
Okay, so I get a new heart, and the word of the Lord is written on my mind and written in my heart. But what? What happens in Ezekiel 36?
He'll put his spirit within us.
His spirit.
Oh my goodness. And what does he do before that happens? Or maybe as that happens? Yeah, he cleanses them. So he'll sprinkle clean water on them and they will be clean. I love that. It will be effective. The sprinkling of the clean water will be effective to make them clean. And he will cleanse them from all filthiness. And what?
All their idols.
Yeah, all of their idols will be removed. All that's just washed away, right? And he'll give them a new heart, which is a heart of flesh, and he'll put a new spirit within them. And what spirit? What kind of spirit? Just any old spirit?
Holy Spirit.
His spirit.
It's his spirit. So they will do what?
Observe his ordinances.
Yeah, so they'll be obedient, right? So what happens when God puts His Spirit into you, you think, regarding His law? What happens here? Do I do it? Do I not do it? Do I just ignore it?
Well, in a sense, you can't ignore it.
Right.
You can't say, I didn't know that.
Mhm.
Or, I mean, there's a conviction.
Yes.
So whether you do it or not, there's more of a realization that you're choosing not to do it.
Yeah, and it's His heart speaking to His heart, His Spirit speaking to
Which
His
then
Spirit.
wants to.
Yeah,
obey
that
more
just goes,
so.
yes.
You've just got that Spirit, which is His Spirit, who wants you to obey.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, this promise that He gives is new in Ezekiel 36, is so exciting. I mean, this is a new thing, right? This is a whole new thing, whole fresh thing. Like we looked at new at the end of the week. It's all fresh and beautiful, right? So this Israel could look forward to. They could look forward to a new covenant. They could look forward to a new heart with the Spirit of God inside of them in their land, which is promised to them and to their fathers, forever. They're forever obedient. They're not going to be idolatrous, and they will walk with God perfectly. I mean, by the time you got done with Ezekiel, you should have been pretty pumped if you were one of those exiles, right? And do you think, as we talked about, we're going to evaluate, do you think that the new is better than the old?
Yes.
Absolutely, right? I mean, so what is the author of Hebrews trying to do here? Remember our context. Remember what they're tempted to do.
Yeah, to show them that don't go back to the old. It's dying. It's not as good. We have the new.
It's just, yeah, I mean, it's like, it's so
Yeah,
much
yeah,
better. He's
yeah.
like, I don't know, there's a comedian who's like, has this joke where it's like, you, me. That's and it's a whole long story. I could go through the process, but I'm not going to. But it's that idea.
Yeah.
This is the old.
Yeah.
This is the new.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's just clearly, abundantly obvious
Yeah.
that the new is better. Why would you
Yeah.
even think about going back to the old? And that's what he's doing. And he's pointing them to this Jesus, right?
Because what they could not do is keep it.
Yes. Yeah.
Jesus kept it.
Yes.
And then died so that
Yeah.
they could have it.
Yeah.
It's just, and
That's how
it's
much-
beautiful. And he's been laying these stones, right? And at first I thought about it, and when we first started looking at Hebrews, I kind of thought about it as like stepping stones. But I think more it's stairs, you know, where we're finally walking up this staircase to where we understand that we are up here.
Yeah.
We're no longer down here. We don't even have to look about us at the things of this earth. We can have this heavenly mindset as we look upon Jesus, right? And everything else, and we've been talking about this, everything else goes strangely dim
Yes.
in the light of
Yes.
who He is, right? We
Yes.
just, it's not important anymore, right? It's all Him.
Have you ever read the Chronicles of Narnia? Because at the end, you know, ever up, ever in, ever up, ever in. They're leaving the old and they're going into the promised land. It's
Yeah.
just beautiful.
I haven't read all of them, but
Oh,
I
do.
remember reading one, and Drew read it with me, and we rarely read books together. But he had read them when he was a kid.
I read them to him.
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
you ignited a passion in
Yeah,
him
good,
for all of
yeah.
that, so it's just great. But so we read them together, and I said, we were talking about one of them, and I said, "Do you see Jesus?" And I got so
Yeah,
excited. Do you
yeah,
see it? Do you
yeah.
see it? And he was like, "I didn't see it before." I mean, it was just so neat because
Yeah.
they're so rich
Yes,
of this
yes,
Jesus, and
yeah.
yes, it's we're moving upward, right? And this author of Hebrews is moving us upward as we understand more and more about this Jesus. We go, I don't want any of that
Yeah.
other stuff. I just want this Jesus, right? That's all I need, right? That's all that's important. So yes, the new is better than the old, absolutely. Okay, so we see that he's saying it's better. Don't go back to the old, that one that's obsolete. This one is everlasting. That one is external, and this one is in you, in your hearts and in your minds and in your soul. That one was destroyed through sin. This one, God will be merciful to our iniquities, and he will remember our sins no more, because he is looking upon you as he's looking at Jesus, who was perfect. And that old one had priests that were weak. And this one has a high priest made perfect forever. Do you see that he wants them to place their faith and their hope and their lives on this new covenant? And why? Because it's better.
Yeah.
It's perfect. It's everlasting. It's beautiful. It's glorious. It's wonderful, right? And so we're going to look next week, and we're going to be looking at the tabernacle. Right, so he's kind of been introducing it. He introduced it right at the beginning of chapter 8, but as we get into 9 and 10, we're going to we're about to have our minds blown, I have a feeling, because we're going to get to go back to the Old Testament again, and we're going to look at that intently so that we can understand what it is that Jesus has done for us. I'm so excited.